Hello, good day to everyone. As for our report, we will be discussing about disaster and emergency health psychology. So, let's start with the term disaster. It is actually defined in various ways by different organizations. So, first one is the definition from UNODRR, which is the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. So according to them, it describes it as a serious disruption of the functioning of a community or society at any scale due to hazardous event interacting with conditions of exposure, vulnerability, and capacity leading to human, material, and economic environmental losses and impacts. The second would be the definition from World Health Organization or the WHO. It is a sudden ecologic phenomenon of sufficient magnitude to require external assistance. Here in our context, under RA 10121, disaster is defined similarly as a serious disruption of a functioning of a community or a society involving widespread human, material, economic, or environmental losses and impacts which exceeds the ability of the affected community or society to cope using its own resources. So next is the types of disasters. The first one is the natural disaster and the second one would be the man-made disaster. For the natural disaster, it is a result from natural causes such as cyclones, earthquakes, tsunamis, and tropical storms. They often come with little warnings, leading to significant destruction and loss. For instance is yung Hurricane Milton that just happened recently in Florida, which causes flooding and destructions. So the second type of disaster is the man-made disaster. These are brought about by human actions such as military conflicts, terrorism, political unrest, and industrial accidents. For example, ulit is yung war in Ukraine which caused the disruption of water supplies and caused severe damage in industrial sites leading to toxic spills. And yung toxic spills na yun has a long-term implications for public health and agriculture. Now, let's focus on the emergency health psychology as a specialized field that plays a crucial role during and after disaster events. So this field examines the psychological aspects of health and illness, particularly in emergency situations. It involves applying psychological principles to understand how individuals react to emergencies such as natural disaster, accidents, or medical crises. And the primary goal is to address the mental health needs of individuals affected by emergencies, offering support and interventions to help them cope with stress, trauma, and other psychological challenges that may arise during critical events. If you remember yung seminar natin last month with Ma'am Noreen, she discussed about the role of emergency health psychology such as providing emotional support, crisis interventions, promoting resilience, and the long-term mental health cares, which will be further be discussed by my group mates.
Hello everyone, I am Jenny S. Sabino and I'll be reporting the psychological impact of disasters on communities. There are two types of impacts, the immediate impacts and the long-term impacts. Immediate impacts. First is shock and disbelief. People often experience a sense of shock and disbelief in the immediate aftermath of a disaster. This can lead to numbness, disorientation, and difficulty processing the event. Halimbawa na lang pagkatapos ng bagyong Yolanda noong 2013. Marami sa mga nakaligtas ang nakaramdam ng pagkalito at hindi alam paano harapin ang nangyari. Dahil dito maaaring nakaramdam sila ng pamamanhid o di kaya hindi agad makakilos ng maayos. Second, fear and anxiety. The uncertainty and disruption caused by a disaster can lead to intense fear, anxiety, and panic attacks. Nung pumutok ang Bulkang Taal noong 2020, maraming tao ang natakot na muling sumabog ito. Ang pangyayaring ito ay nagdulot ng matinding takot at pagkapalisa, kaya't maaari silang magpanik sa pag-aakalang nasa panganib ang kanilang buhay o tahanan. Third, loss and grief. Disasters often result in loss of loved ones, homes, and possessions, leading to grief, sadness, and sense of helplessness. Pagkatapos ng bagyong Ulysses noong 2020, maraming pamilya sa Cagayan at Marikina ang nawalan ng lahat. Ito'y nagdulot ng matinding lungkot at lalong itong mahirap para sa mga bata na nawalan ng laruan, alagang hayop o maging mga kapamilya. Now we move on to long-term impacts. First is post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. PTSD triggered by witnessing or experiencing traumatic events. PTSD symptoms include flashbacks, nightmares, severe anxiety, and uncontrollable thoughts about the event. Research indicates that the prevalence of PTSD among directly impacted populations can range from 30% to 40% in the year following a disaster. For example, is the Maguindanao Massacre in 2009, a politically motivated mass killing that resulted in 58 deaths, causing profound trauma for families and witnesses. Second, anxiety and depression. Common response among disaster survivors include persistent sadness, hopelessness, and elevated anxiety levels, often persisting for years. Studies shows that rates of depression and anxiety are typically elevated in disaster-impacted populations, affecting 20% to 30% of individuals. This was seen in the communities affected by the Marawi siege in 2017, where survivors had to rebuild their lives from scratch. Third is substance abuse. Many people affected by disasters turn to increased substance use or misuse as a coping mechanism, which can exacerbate existing mental health conditions or lead to new health and social issues. During the COVID-19 pandemic 2020, many people started smoking or drinking excessively due to anxiety and stress caused by job loss and loneliness from the quarantine. And the last one is the chronic stress. The stress stemming from loss, displacement, and the disruption of everyday life impacts long-term health. Living through disasters bring long-term stress, especially when families are displaced and have to live in shelters for a long time. They may worry about money, schooling, and rebuilding their homes. This kind of stress can affect their health in the long run.
So, dito naman tayo sa preparedness and response strategies. This is the ability to prepare, respond, and recover from natural disasters and other calamities depends on preparedness and response. The goal is to keep people safe by preventing dangers, preparing for disasters, and acting quickly to minimize damage when something bad happens. Next is the risk assessment. Identifying potential hazard and vulnerabilities specific to a community, organization, or individual. First, we need to understand the risk. What could affect our community? Ito yung mga mostly na nangyayari sa atin, gaya ng flooding, pagguho ng lupa, at earthquakes. Kailangan din natin malaman yung mga bagay na nagpapahina sa isang community, like yung mga old buildings, also limited din tayo sa healthcares. Next is the mitigation techniques, implementing measures to reduce the likelihood of potential hazard. We can reduce the impact of this risk like strengthening buildings, improving drainage systems, and promoting public health awareness campaigns. But before this, kailangan din natin maging prepared. This means having plans in place for families, kailangan ng mga emergency fund, emergency kits, also maging informed din sila sa mga balita. For the community naman, kailangan mag-establish ng evacuation routes para mas madaling makadating sa evacuation center. Kailangan din natin mag-organize ng mga volunteer groups para may mag-a-assist sa ating mga mag-e-evacuate. Finally, we need to empower everyone to understand risk, make information decisions, and take proactive steps for mitigate potential harm. Next is the response strategies, the psychological first aid. This is about providing human support to someone who's been through a crisis, helping them stabilize and regain their strength. Imagine someone going through a really tough time, maybe a natural disaster, a bad accident, or a loss. They might feel lost and scared. That's where psychological first aid steps in to help them feel better and start to recover. So, psychological first aid follows 3 key steps. The look, listen, and link. Under the look means assessing the situation. Is the environment safe? Like, yung may mga natumba bang poste, may mga puno bang nakaharang sa daanan, may bahaba. Are there immediate needs? May mga nasagwatan ba? Kailangan ba nila ng pagkain or tubig? Also, we need to observe the person's reaction. Are they showing signs of distress? We can provide factual information. Pwede nating sabihin yung lagay ng panahon. Ganon. Tapos, reassurance, gaya ng pagsabi ng ligtas na sila ngayon at paparating na ang tulong. And let them know we hear and understand them. Under naman sa listen means being a supportive presence. Respect their privacy and confidentiality. Kailangan mo, gaya ng pagsasabi ng, kailangan mo ba ng ilang oras para mapag-isa? Acknowledge their strengths and resilience. Pwede mong sabihin, nakikita kitang malakas kaya nakayanan mo yan. Yung ganyang sitwasyon. Also, don't touch, judge, interrupt, or pressure them. And avoid giving false assurance, gaya ng, or wag mong sabihin, magiging maayos ang lahat kahit hindi naman talaga. Kasi baka umasa. Char. Sa link naman, link means connecting them to resources. If their stress reactions are causing impairments, they might need professional help. We can refer them to mental health professionals, support groups, or other appropriate services. For example, yung isang nasalanta ng bagyo ay kinausap ka tapos sabi niya hindi siya makatulog or nahihirapan siyang makatulog tapos nakakaranas din siya ng bangungot or something. Pwede mo siyang i-refer sa isang therapist or psychologist kasi sila naman yung sila yung mas nakakaalam kung ano yung pwede nilang gawin.
So now that we have learned about the preparedness and response strategy, let us now move on with the natural disasters and public health crisis in the Philippines. Public health crisis are any situation that poses threats to the health and well-being of the public, which includes natural disasters, epidemic, environmental hazards, and even terrorism activities. Alright, so we are actually at risk with this crisis, especially with natural disasters, because the Philippines is situated along the Pacific Ring of Fire, and we also have a fault line known as the Big One, or the West Valley Fault Line, which endangers the nation once it activates, or something like that. And aside from that, we are also vulnerable to other mental health disorders, or mental health illnesses, especially in times of crisis, because of poverty, okay? Because of poor governance and corruption. Instead of allocating those budgets to help the needy, to help the nation, they are keeping it for themselves, right? Also because of our lack of knowledge and information. But fortunately, we also have protective factors that helps us to get through this crisis, okay, or these calamities. One of which is family support, community support, our bayanihan, or our collectivistic nature, or our interdependence. Collectivism means interdependence, or us helping each other without expecting anything in return. And we also have our spiritual faith, okay? Because of our faith, it helps us to cope and to adapt with a stressful situation. All right, now, so an example, by the way, of a natural disasters in the Philippines is that super typhoon Haiyan, or also known as Yolanda. So this Yolanda hit the Philippines on November 2013, killing over 6,000 people, displacing 16 million, and this affecting 16 million and displacing 4 million people. And 6 months after, there are still 2 million survivors who have no adequate housing, and 26,000 still live on temporary shelters or evacuation centers, while 80,000 are at risk of having mental health disorders, according to the World Health Organization. Now, because of the lack of interventions to help these survivors, 30 psychologists from the Philippines and the US gathered on February 14 to develop a framework that will help these survivors. So their goal is to strengthen the survivors, to help them cope with this crisis, okay? And the process by which is that, of course, they discussed the impact of disaster to the survivors, their psychosocial needs, their vulnerabilities, and also their protective factors. After that, they looked at the need for cultural adaptation. So they found out that the program they are going to make they must incorporate cultural factors so that it will reach the target, okay, it will so that the survivors can relate, and thus making the program more effective. After that, they drafted the design, they wrote the modules, and they had a pilot testing to evaluate and to modify the program. Now, this framework, they called it as Katatagan, by the way, this program, Katatagan program. So, Katatagan program is a group-based resilience program designed to hone the coping skills of Filipinos and to build their resilience. It mainly targets the resilience of the survivors. Why the resilience? Because resilience, according to Luther and company, is the process where individuals adapt positively to any situation despite their traumatic experience. Despite what you've been through, resilience is what makes you strong. It is what drives you to keep going on despite everything. That is what Katatagan program wants to build, wants to develop. So, okay, so they have 6 goals. And before we discuss that, we are going to look at who are the target of this program. Of course, these are the adult survivors that experiences mild to moderate symptoms. Why adult? Because adults are the ones who have the responsibility to look after their children or to look over the younger generations. Of course, in order to look after those younger generations, the adult people needs to be resilient first, enough for them to function properly. And they should have mild to moderate symptoms, kasi if they have extreme symptoms na, they are going to be referred to professions with professions in that specific field, such as psychologist, psychiatrist, something like that. Now, where do we conduct this Katatagan program? Anywhere, as long as it is safe and convenient. And when, of course, after disaster phase, after the basic needs are supplied, we are going to conduct Katatagan framework. It can also be conducted weeks or years after a disaster, as long as it is needed. So duration, ideally, Katatagan framework, so each module of Katatagan framework or program should be implemented once a week. So, one module per week dapat yun. However, it can also be conducted in a 2-day workshop. So, who delivers Katatagan? Of course, anyone. As long as they are trained. So, as long as they have a basic knowledge on psychological first aid, as long as they can determine the symptoms of those survivors who needs referrals. Okay, so, and these can be acquired through trainings or seminars. The good thing about this Katatagan framework is, diba, there is a lack of professionals in the there is a lack of mental health practitioners. That's why those 30 psychologists who gathered developed a program that can be facilitated even by even by those who are not mental health practitioners. Kasi nga, there is a lack of mental health practitioners, kaya they developed something flexible enough to be conducted by anyone as long as they have the basic requirements. Okay. Now, so this is the Katatagan or the Katatagan program. So, it starts with the kalakasan or pagpapanday ng kalakasan. Kasi, of course, survivors will experience a diminished strength or diminished, inner strength. Kasi no matter how resilient you are, if you experience something very traumatic, of course, that will always put you down, Parang bababa yung kalooban mo. Now, the goal of this module is to help those survivors revisit their strength. It is to help them to find out the strength they once lost and to use it so that makabangon silang muli. Okay, so that one. And we also have the katawan or pangangalaga sa katawan. So, of course, these survivors will experience somatic reactions that are either caused by the disaster or it was caused by their mental health state. Kasi mental health state can cause somatic reactions, diba? We have learned that one, and the mind-body reaction. So, the goal of this module is to help them manage their physical reaction by engaging them in physical activities and in meditation, such as meditation, and of course in engaging them in healthier habits such as exercises, reading, something like that. Now, we also have the kalooban or the managing of thoughts and emotions. Now, survivors, it is very understandable if survivors will have unhealthy thoughts and emotions. Kasi those are a normal reaction in an abnormal situation, diba? We have learned that one as well. So, the goal of this module is to help them manage their thoughts and emotions, okay? Help them manage their thoughts and emotions by reframing their cognitive constructs, by reframing how they process the events, okay? So, Katatagan, by the way, incorporates cognitive behavioral therapies or therapies that targets their cognition and their behavior. So, through these therapies, they are going to help them reconstruct how they look at the world or their belief so that they will adopt a more positive belief or emotion, Now, we also have the what's this? Kalutasan, kaagapay, kalutasan at kaagapay, or seeking solutions and support. So, since survivors, okay, have a general lack of information how to access relevant services, and of course, they have many problems as well. So the goal of this module is to help the survivors look for possible solutions to their problem by teaching them the relevant services that they can avail, that such as they will introduce to them about DSWD or other non-government agencies that they can run to. Okay, so we also have the kapaki-pakinabang na gawain. Of course, so survivors manifests behavioral symptoms of distress due to disruption of their daily routines. Kasi nga, if they are staying in a temporary shelter or evacuation center, they are doing nothing aside from sleeping and eating and sitting, and yeah, they do not do anymore their daily routines before the calamity. And that's why they shows distress, behavioral distress. Kaya, the goal of this module is to help them identify their past routines or past activities, and they will guide them to identify, are these routines helpful or no? Are these routines positive or negative? So, after that, after categorizing those ones, so, excuse me, facilitators will also help them to, to build their motivation in order to do those positive activities they are doing before the disaster, such as if they are doing reading books, exercises, then facilitators will guide them to do those things again. But if they are doing vices, if they are engaged in vices such as alcoholism, smoking, of course, the goal of this module is also to help them refrain from those negative activities. So, the goal of this is to help them regain a sense of normalcy. Kasi nga, because the typhoon disrupted their daily routines. And last but not the least, we have the kinabukasan or moving forward. When we say kinabukasan or moving forward, this is survivors are at risk of having a sense of hopelessness to the point na hindi na nila alam ang gagawin nila. Hindi na nila alam kung kanino pa sila bumabangon. Because especially if they have lost a loved one, of course, if they have lost their home, their jobs, they don't know what to do anymore. And that's why the goal of this module is to help the survivors determine a smart goal. Smart, diba? Smart goals, like specify, measurable, attainable, time-bound, something like that. So, realistic goals that they want for their future. And after identifying such goal, they are going to guide the survivors to identify certain procedures on how do they achieve those goals. So, ayun, that activity can help those survivors to look at what do they still want for their life, okay, for their lives, okay. So, such that, they want to build a sense of hope, okay, a sense of hopefulness, okay, something like that. So, they want those survivors to be grateful that they are still alive and to give them a different purpose in life and to help them find their purpose in life. So, that's very much it. As we can see, there is no specific part for spiritual health. However, this program incorporated spiritual health, by the way. They incorporated prayers, fellowships in their program when they implemented the program. And they also have a pilot testing in Tacloban among college universities. And yeah, they found out that it's quite effective. And that pilot testing actually helps them to modify some of the things, okay, to make it more inclined or more relatable to the survivors. So you can actually read the whole article by clicking the link in our references. So that's ill. That's ill. So that's all, and thank you so much. I'm sorry for because we extended the time limit. Okay. So thank you so much for watching.